Hour of Empower. The word of the day is forgiveness. I am so happy and blessed to have the dynamic duo with us again. We've got Leslie Flowers and we've got Catherine Chadwick. We're all getting better too, so the show will only be better than the one you saw of us last time. With that said, chat is wide open. We depend on chat to direct us, make us as relevant. Our goal is to give you as many quality takeaways as possible. And really, the key thing, and we talked about this prior to the show, is taking action, even if it's small action, right? Just get the momentum and the trend in place. And that's where I think forgiveness can play a major role in getting you moving in the right direction. So while Chad is starting to populate, Leslie, why don't you bring us all up to date? I know you're doing some fabulous things out there.
Okay. Uh, Happy to be here with my friends, and forgiveness uh, is a challenging subject at times. Um, it takes a long time, depending on how long there have been problems. Hey, there's Kelly. So, what am I up to? Well, this week starts my Q4 12-week training, my hybrid training. And then on Mondays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I do Mind Over Matter Mondays. And it's an audio room where they can talk about forgiveness. It's not recorded, there's no video. So there are more sensitive conversations that can occur in an audio room. And then on Friday at 10 a.m., I teach the principles of success from Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill in order, and the best lessons from Think and Grow Rich. So those are my two things that you can count on me for doing every week. And then occasionally, I'm invited to speak here. Thank you, Donald.
Oh, you're very welcome and very accomplished. I'm proud of what you've been able to create in such a short period of time, exposing your knowledge and experience to a much wider audience and a much more interactive audience. I think people who get in front of people in real time are more real people. So, with that said, Catherine, so nice to have you back. Forgiveness is the word. Actually, it's one of the words you suggested. So you have to take credit for the whole show. And isn't that cool? And with that said, Catherine, why don't you share?
That's really funny. Well, good morning, everybody. I'm delighted to be here. And it's so fun to be here with you, Leslie and Don, because it's always a fabulous conversation. Forgiveness came to mind. I was talking with a client about it the other day, and what came up for her, what she said, she sounded really vindictive. And I'm like, wow, that's taking a lot of energy, right? Because when we don't forgive, it's taking up a lot of our energy. And of course, that doesn't help the relationship with anybody, and particularly with yourself. And so I talked to her, more about that. And I said, how's your forgiveness work coming? And she said, wow, that's a tough sell. And I said, all right, let's see what we can do to soften that up a little bit, right? And so reminding her that it's not really about condoning what anybody has said or what anyone has done or what you may have done or said. It's really about allowing the freedom to move on, to become part of your exercise, to be part of your daily living. And it does take work and it does take time. And so, but I think it's a fabulous practice to put into your practice because it's highly valuable and it's very difficult to raise your vibration if you've got this millstone of vindictiveness or blame or all and reliving what may have happened over and over and over and over. That doesn't serve any good purpose.
Yeah, you're both so right on. And when I look at not forgiving, it's the energy, the distraction of what I could have been thinking or doing. And that's almost like electricity, because there's a pain, there's a burn, there's something that's still stinging, that when you bring it up to yourself, you feel a certain way, where if you could just dismiss it with forgiveness, right? And really what you're doing is forgiving yourself. The other person has no idea about this conversation.
That's right.
You're not sending letters out or anything. You're just deciding independently, which you should, in something that wasn't positive to begin with, to involve that person to get agreement. Now you're asking for permission to forgive yourself. And I think that alone should say something as to where is your mind going with all this stuff.
Mhm.
And I think, it's action again. Once you can forgive, you don't have to forget, but you don't have to remember either. It can't be in the back of the last drawer that you never really go to anymore. So with that said, let's get back to our chat. And naturally, we got Kelly. Kelly really has made this show what it is to a larger extent, and continues to bring it forward in the awesome journey that she does with Christy Howard on Tuesdays at 1:11 p.m. Eastern Time. And this is a way to expand your knowledge through more time with select people that you find to be, resonating. Or it doesn't have to be either or. It's really more either and, right? Take this class and then go to that class if you want. I mean, this is a free university with people bringing the best of who they are when they are to you, in front of you, at your discretion, right? So, I mean, I think it's a wonderful opportunity. Harvey is here. Harvey has his franchise show. I'm so proud of Harvey. He's really putting it together. I was honored to be his first guest, and then Kelly was his second.
Nice.
So we've been working together as a team in so many ways. Hello, everyone. A powerful word today. Forgiveness is key for inner peace and learning. It works. Let's just say that. And, if you just decide, hey, this works, then it makes sense. Elizabeth is here. Elizabeth, great to see you. Look forward to having you back. Ashif, who's here every day from Toronto, has one of the most empowering quotes he brings up. Really makes a difference. A lot of the audience is like pitching us home run balls, all through the session. It makes it so much easier to be here. Wendy's here. Great to see you. It's been a little bit, but I do see your posts, so keep up the good work. Elizabeth, great. And we'll move to Harvey. Great. Hello, everyone. A powerful word today. I think we just covered that. Randy's here. I haven't seen you, Randy, in a while. Welcome. Great to see you. Says hello to everybody. Omar's here. I'm going to be on Omar's show. Great to see you, Omar. Maria's here. Maria's here almost every day. What a great launch to a Saturday show. With that said, Leslie, what a send-off.
Oh, yeah. Good morning, everybody. So I've actually given some thought to this process, and my own experience for forgiveness, if you will, my personal experiences after a 30-year marriage dissolved, and I didn't want to. And it was based on big, deep betrayal. Big, deep betrayal. Now, what I've noticed over the last 20 years, and it took 15 years to ultimately forgive. So it is a process pretty dependent, it seems, on how long you were involved. And, it's really 2 steps forward, 3 steps back, 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Now, in the first 2 years, I sat in the dark, right, having a pity party. I worked during the day, came home and cried every night, right, because I did not want this marriage to end. And of course, there was nothing about forgiveness because he was bad and wrong. Mm-hmm. And I told people, and I lost some good friends because all I could do talk about is how bad he was. So that was like, I would say that I took the low road. When people say, take the high road, be the better person. BS. When you've raised a family, for 30 years and you had everything going and something occurred outside your knowledge, but literally imploded the marriage. So there was a lot of anger. Now you cannot forgive and be angry in the same moment. So forgiveness didn't even, it barely reared its ugly head or his beautiful head for 10 years. Now, what I can tell you now is what it looks like looking back. Of course, it's not as dramatic. There's no topography, right? It's like a straight line. When it's in front of you, it's like, holy crap, you're climbing, the mountains in Switzerland, right, to get to that forgiveness. And you think you've got it. And then, oh crap, somebody says something and you're reminded and you bring it back up again and you work it over. How wrong he was, how bad it was. And it really was. But it, like Donald said, it had nothing to do with him. Forgiveness was all within me, and I could not forgive while my perception was that he was a bad person. What it looks like now after this very long process, it's been 20 years, and it was at year 15 that I was absolutely able to let the anger go completely and appreciate the many, many, many good things. In fact, I would say our marriage was 85% fabulousness. But this process, so now I can talk about it objectively. I can give you the points. But if you had asked me this 10 years ago, there's all this flesh, this emotional flesh that's attached to this aspiration of forgiving. And what does forgiveness mean anyway? It's really, I don't forgive myself. Maybe it is forgiving myself for being angry with him, but I don't know that that's it. There had to be an acceptance of the best part of him. I had to see that and focus on that. And when I began to look at all the wonderful things he did, and it took a few years, right? All of a sudden, the weight changed. And now my thoughts were intentionally more of what a good dad he was, what a good provider he was. Mm-hmm. So this was a life-changing process. And I will tell you that the highs that I've experienced after forgiveness match the depths of the lows. So it is said, based on the law of rhythm, that the lowest point in your life will have a matching high. So I'm always looking up and looking for people and opportunities that show up. Is this the matching high? Because it always comes. And so we have to be patient with ourselves. I guess that's the thing that I've learned. And it didn't matter, Donald, to your point, it doesn't matter what he did or said. He could beg for forgiveness. That's not forgiveness. It comes from me. So that's what I'll share today.
Well, that's a great share. I know people got a lot out of it because it's so much easier to speak from experience, mm-hmm. because you lived it every day, you felt it every day, and you continue to think about it in days into the future.
Yes.
And here's one thing I believe with forgiveness is when you separate, you have to give everything back to the person, right? Just like if someone leaves, they got to pack their bags and get their stuff and leave. At that point, you have no control over them and they have no control over you, right? And then you're just working on yourself. And some people take the same people with them, mentally or emotionally, that are already gone and aren't coming back. But to your point, Leslie, which I think is very insightful, is all my major business relationships, because fortunately I've had a wonderful family life, mm-hmm. Ended in betrayal. Mm-hmm. But there were sometimes 30 years before that happened. Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And-
yeah. Well, 30 years.
Yeah, well, but the thing is the last year dependent on the 29 years prior to it. So if you look at everything sequentially
Yeah.
and you say, hey, for 29 years, it was a roller coaster of fun.
Mhm.
In 1 year, someone slipped somehow, right? And that was the end of it. And the end is what you remember most because you're closer to it most. And everything good before it makes you question, why did it have to end, right? Because it was doing so good and it had the potential to do good. So I think the key is you got to, once you're on your own, you got 100% of yourself back too, right?
But you know what? It took me a while to do that because after I sat in the dark for 2 years and lost some good friends, right? One day I literally woke up and said, okay, I'm done with this part of it, whatever it was, because the pity parties, I mean, I was a masterful hostess. Right? I could prove him wrong in a moment, right? Anybody who would listen, I would share, like the low road. But then one day I woke up and I said, enough of this. And I re registered in the Landmark Forum, which is like a transformational program. And I threw myself into that because, Donald, I did not feel whole. You say that we get to take back, ideally, that part of us that we gave so readily, but it was like my roots were cut from the earth. I was not a whole person for those 2 years. Like I had no roots, I had no place to call my own. It was horrible. But then when I decided to get into action, I spent the next 6 months taking every program they had. And then I slowly began to realize, hey, you're pretty cool. And too bad for him. The other thing is to your point about dragging the past, I did a very funny presentation about carrying the baggage. So whenever I try to date, who am I looking for? Someone that looks like him. So all the guys that I picked out, right, on the sites and all the attributes and the features were just like my ex-husband. But I don't want that. So when you go to date someone, you're dragging all your relationships. Hey, you want to have a relationship with me? I can't stand this guy because he did this. No, nobody wants to have a relationship with you and all your boyfriends or all your ex-husbands, right? So that was the other thing. When would I look at men? And that's my interest, men, right? When would I begin to see them as not like him? When would I actually see them as a complete, and that had to do with the forgiveness. The sooner I was able to find the good in my ex-husband and really latch on to the good and believe it again, all the good things he did, then I started seeing men as individuals without the baggage.
Well, to that point, I think one of the keys is the time factor, right? So we're talking, well, here's a process. You do this, you get here. But a lot of things, you're raw. You know what you just left, and you're uncertain of what you're going to find. So you're in your worst position. You're at 0 or less. Once you start moving forward and accumulating things and bringing people into your life, and one of the things I've always done, when it gets too heavy for yourself, get involved in a bigger group, in something bigger than yourself. And before you know it, they'll keep shifting your mind away from what it is. And at a certain point, you got to ask yourself, fast forward, where is this taking me again? Why am I in this loop? Why am I thinking this again? I'm going to have to get out of it to do something else eventually. So in a way, the question is, what am I hurting myself for? Why do I rehash something I know is going to do certain things to me? And I think that's just a matter of taking your time, understanding how you can take little steps in the right direction or the better direction. And that comes with counseling, that comes with coaching, that comes with training. You know, people have done it. People have experienced, but more importantly, they've experienced so many people who have experienced it. You know, somebody like Catherine, somebody like Leslie, somebody like myself. You know, what would be the price if you said, if I can get out of this thing in 3 weeks instead of 3 years, what would that do for me?
But I don't think you can. So
No,
I want to ask Catherine.
that's an exaggeration, but yeah, Catherine, it's your turn. Me and Leslie have a have a
Really,
gift.
but Catherine, don't you think that this, it's nice to say, let's get out of it. I know what I should do intellectually,
Right.
but it's almost like this trigger overwrites everything else. What would you say? Is that an accurate view, or does that make sense, Catherine?
Oh, it makes a lot of sense. And as you both were talking, what came to mind is it does take time. I grew up in a household that was not a very fun place to be. And that took a very long time to get through that. And what I landed on, with my parents is that, people do what they know. And that, and that whole thing about, don't take it personally. It's very difficult to not take it personally, right?
That's
And right. So it's just like, wow. But when you get a little maturity, I think it makes it a little bit easier to see. And also, as we go along, we're really meant to change. And that's why I think relationships run into difficulties, because we're not necessarily changing in the same direction or at the same rate, right? And so you're talking about a 30-year marriage. I'm talking about a 27-year marriage, right? And it wasn't a pretty picture at all. And so talk about being at a low point. I'm waiting for my divorce papers to come with a PICC line in my arm, giving myself an infusion every day for Lyme disease. And it's just like, oh my word. And a lot of untruths were being talked about me. I wasn't in contact with my children at the time. And it's just like, oh my gosh. And so, you look at me now and think of me 30 pounds lighter. Like, wow, talk
me
about
too. Me,
talk,
40 pounds.
yeah, talk about a low point. But what's fascinating is that as we come back out and expand ourselves, and you made a very good point, Leslie, I'm pretty cool, right? Yeah. And you really find things about yourself that's just like, whoa, why was I making myself small all along, right? And so that brought me to, my responsibility in the relationship. I'm always looking, had been working to make myself small, which isn't the real me. So it's like, okay, I have some responsibility in this whole, another fine mess you've gotten me into, Ollie, right? And so but I got to the point where I could find a real opportunity and talk about the law of rhythm. It's just like, whoa. And then when you start to blossom, you absolutely realize the part that we each had in the relationship. And yes, the good points from the other person. And what's fascinating too is we have, I think it's such a gift of going down the path that we're on, as far as learning and expanding and understanding more about forgiveness, about expansion, about energy principles. And what a gift all of this is that other folks don't necessarily have a great understanding of. And they're kind of, digging the same ditch all the time. And I am so delighted to not be doing that it's just like, oh my gosh, this is freedom, right?
Oh yeah, look what Ashif just wrote. Forgiveness is just a name for freedom.
Yeah.
Byron Katie.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's start with the comments.
Yeah.
Before we do, one thing I want to add to what you ladies have said, which is so important, is none of us would be where we are right now if it wasn't for everything that happened before us.
Absolutely.
Right? So a lot of times it's a pivot that someone throws you off a horse and makes you jump on another one. or takes you off the direction you were planning and then makes you reinvent yourself to move on to the next level. But one thing I will say is a lot of times people try to deal with things directly. And sometimes you can get some benefit by dealing with it indirectly, which is to say, if you've been betrayed before, the next time you get betrayed doesn't make it any better or easier. But what it says, I've dealt with this before, and this is what I'm used to going through. So once you can examine something and say, okay, did it again, stepped in a muddy hole or something, right? But with that said, let's get back to the audience or we never will. So anyways, forgiveness is just a name for freedom. Maria says, it doesn't matter how long the marriage is. As human beings, we're programmed to avoid anyone who is proven to be untrustworthy. Forgiving someone who harmed us goes against our very instincts. And I think that's very valid. But the key is now that someone's found themselves down on the ground because of where they used to be, how do you get up? Mm-hmm. And how do you continue to move forward in the proper way? People think forgiveness is a free pass. Running away from reality is not bravado. Sheaf comes back with enough is a decision, not an amount. That's so true. Alex Faulkner. Here is Anjan's here. Thank you for coming, Anjan. Life is not a fairy tale. Worldwide, we read about the disastrous ending. So forgive and forget, easy, but what really hurts. And, and what you say and think doesn't necessarily impact what people do, right? You can still wish the best for everybody because their success doesn't come off of your loss and your success doesn't come off of theirs. And again, it'll be what it'll be. Why project or judge? Randy says, be honest. Forgiveness includes acknowledging that you are hurt, accepting the pain in your own, and being honest with yourself about the effect it's had on you. Be vulnerable, be humble. Well, what it does force you to do is be something different, whatever that is. That train has left the station. Now you're sitting there with your bags wondering, when's the next train? Where's it go to? And how do I get on it? Harvey Tuck says, forgiveness can help in many avenues of life. Take driving. It becomes an almost stress-free if you smile and forgive others around you. Anger takes too much energy. Yeah. If you're angry and don't forgive, it affects you the most. Smile and let it go. Makes sense. As Sheaf says, forgive, clear your spiritual compass. I think that makes so much sense. Kelly comes back with the road to forgiveness isn't always easy. Lovely share, Leslie. And then we've got Elizabeth. I love stories and their positive outcomes. And that is, everybody's got a story and everybody's story is important to them. And I think respecting everybody's voice and ability to share, especially in the most respectful way, is encouraging. And I think a lot of people would release things if they had a safe audience or a group of people that really looked at it as a positive expression of what's inside of them versus telling them what they should have done or could have done or all that other stuff. And that's why I think forums like this make so much sense. When one forgives, two souls are set free. That's a really good one. Elizabeth says we must practice. Look at the good in others, not their lack. It takes time. It brightens your picture when you brighten other people's picture. You know what I mean? When you shine more light, you receive more light.
Hey, Donald, let me. I want keep doing this, but I wanted to say something about what Catherine said.
Okay, please.
Right, because she grew up in a difficult household. So did I. In our household, nothing was ever right. Our father was a genius, graduated high school at 15, university at 18. Right? Just total genius and really impatient. How come you can't get this? You're not getting these concepts. But let me tell you, I couldn't find anything good about anybody until I married that man and spent 30 years. And he was raised by the sweetest Christian mom who never learned to drive and who really lived being kind to others. And he taught me, and he took the sharp edges off.
Mm.
He helped me see the good in people. And now that's all I see. So there's, right, when all of the flesh of the betrayal finally washes away, there's some clarity there. And that was probably the most important gift that I got in my life, was having him as a husband to help me see the goodness in others. So there you have it.
Well, that's great. Thank you. I think that's important.
Thank you.
Cynthia says, forgiveness comes when you both accept your responsibility for the demise of the relationship. I've been through it too, and when we understood each other, we remarried. Wow, that's, see, there's things can come full circle. Paul says, Randy, always good to see you. And here we got Harvey, who thanks me. Thank you, Don. That means a lot. Your faith in me and everything I've learned from you and everyone on the Hour of Empower, something I will always value. Thank you. And, maybe shows like this allow people to, maybe there is something forgiveness. Maybe, like Leslie says, this is the day. I'm just giving it up, right? I mean, I did what I could, and it is what it is. And let's focus on the future. I always look at when people decide to reject you for any reason, if you're that confident in yourself, it's almost like a regift.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's like now someone else who appreciates it and who understands and looks forward to it has an opening, right? So when someone says no to you, they're saying yes to someone else for you or with you. And if you look at adding instead of subtracting, if you look at, well, they burned out, but here's the thing. How much can you expect from anybody for how long?
Right.
Because everybody can start exactly at the right place and stay there for a while, but there's going to be people learn differently, grow differently, and other people who don't. And then all of a sudden you've got a gap. And the other thing is that's really hard is, the other person knew everything they were doing before you ever had an idea, right? So there was almost living a lie during a certain period.
Oh, yeah.
Right? It's not like someone one day says something and then it just ends, right? So the point is there's always more to it. Give yourself more time and give yourself more attention from people who really can tell you you're okay, we're okay, it's going to be okay. I've been through it. I know what's involved, and that gives somebody hope. And I think if you can gain any traction or momentum, at least the hope that tomorrow is going to be a better day or could be a better day. Some people look at it and they say it's only going to get worse, and that's their fear every day, is like, what do I do? And that's enough of a question to go look for a person or an opportunity for an answer, because you got the half that you need. What do you need? What do I need to do? You just don't have the other half that will give you that answer.
Mm-hmm.
I tell you, hang out with us. And I think, I see people here every day who are getting little answers to questions that they don't even ask, but they watch other people ask and receive. And everybody shares. Yeah, I'll take it's like a buffet. What's the soup today? I'll take a bowl of that. So with that, Catherine, we never give you enough time, but I'm going to try and make up for it in this last half hour. You're just too nice, and me and Leslie are too ambitious to talk at times. We just bubble over. So, Catherine,
What are you talking about, Donald?
Oh, it's something else. Anyways, Catherine.
That's really funny. Well, it's interesting. We were talking about hope, and that's the only positive emotion that requires a negative emotion as a catalyst.
Mm-hmm.
And it works as a fabulous bridge. It's not a great place to be sitting on all the time. You want to get to the other side of the bridge, but you're going to have that tool in your pocket to use it again and again and again and again. And I think that's important for people to know. And in all of this, what comes to mind is it very much comes down, I believe, to making a decision to make the change that is the most beneficial for us. And it doesn't necessarily look the same for each person, right? The trajectory is, the vision is, okay, I want to get out of this quagmire, and what's the next best step that I can take to move me along a little bit? And it is a process, and making that decision and sticking with that decision and living with intention makes a huge difference, because that changes your whole vibrational makeup. And when you're moving forward and moving yourself up the vibrational scale,
That's right.
then that's where you meet the people that you're really meant to be with at that time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's important for people to understand that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, Leslie, you said absolutely.
Well, I mean, that's it. When you say you made the decision, it's a choice. And the thing about forgiveness, you repeat the choice. So, right, I remember during the tough days of my marriage, and even in the beginning, there were some difficult days, and I reminded myself, I choose this marriage the way it is,
Mhm.
and the way it is not.
Mhm.
So, in other words, I'm buying the whole package. And so, when things happen that didn't go along the way I thought they might or ought to or had hoped, then I didn't allow myself to stay in the dumps, because I reminded myself that I have a choice, right? And I chose both sides of the marriage, and that always relaxed me. But in the terms though, Catherine, about this, and Donald too, this long process, you have to repeat the choice over
Yeah.
and over in spaced repetitive intervals over time, until that becomes your go-to thought about that situation.
Mhm.
And so, would you agree, Catherine, that it is a repetitive choice? Like, you have to be intentional about it. Yes.
Oh, no question. And you might make it several times a day, not just once a day, but several times a day, right? Okay. My intention today is, right?
It's just there are no quick fixes, people. I
Right.
mean, as much as I've tried, I haven't found a quick fix for anything. And so, anybody who has, please do share.
Well, I think too is
Yeah.
if it if it is a big deal or was a big deal because it was a big whatever, it's not something that's going to dissipate just because of a thought.
That's
You
right.
know, if you had a bad can of soup or something, it'd be like no big deal. You'd never think about it the next day. But when you're talking about relationships, it's also about how you value yourself.
Mhm.
If you feel you were given as much or more, better in almost all cases when you could, right? And someone rejects you, you get all of that to give to someone else or to give back to yourself. And if you know you're worthy, if you know you're attractive, right? Then, hey, you're just giving me another opportunity. But, most of this stuff you do pick up over time, surprises are surprises, but things look kind of unfamiliar. People's authenticity starts to get questioned. I mean, their answers aren't what they used to be, a little bit more opaque, or worse, no communication, right? When everybody's just passing in the fog and going through the normal gyrations of looking okay, and no one's talking. And I think that benefits the person who enjoys communicating, enjoys expressing. It's the person who can't talk, can't ever let anything open to other people, that will not just lose in the relationship, they'll lose, like Leslie says, in every relationship if they don't change.
Right.
Because if someone's given so much and so well, and isn't recognized for more than the relationship, but especially the family dynamic,
Mhm.
right? That should weigh in someone's favor.
But here's the thing, Donald. While intellectually everything you're saying is accurate,
No,
but when you're in the throes of it, it's not your conscious mind and your strategic thinking or reasoning that's in charge. It is the negative beliefs about yourself. So I know I'm a phenomenal person. I mean, heck, that's the reason why he wanted to be with me in the first place, right? Because of who I am. But the thing is that you can't be that person and be at the mercy of self-defeat and
Sure.
finding something wrong with you. So, yes, intellectually, we do come to that, but in reality, there's a conflict. And typically, those negative emotions are stronger than our ability to reason. So, which thought is going to win out? The negative, until you start practicing looking for the goodness, finding the goodness, then that becomes your new belief, right, about that person, about that thing. Then all that you're saying intellectually and on a conscious level, you can do. You do by choice. But gosh, when you're in it, and Donald, I'm very happy that you've never had to experience that and never will.
You know,
But we're here for you just in case.
well, yeah, and I think that I've gotten a lot better over time, not majoring in the minors, understanding that, really about 98% of the stuff that goes on, I got an opinion on, but I really don't care that much about it.
Right.
Right. So if someone says you like blue or green, I'm like, I like green, but if you love blue, I like blue too. Right. So you don't have to get into keeping score. And sometimes it's like, hey, just do it. Right. I learned long ago, and I mentioned this before, every yes you give someone will return a yes, and every no will return a no. Right. If someone says, can I go somewhere? And someone says, no, you can't. If that person chooses not to, the next time you ask, hey, I'm going somewhere, well, what happened when I wanted to go somewhere? And now it's tit for tat the other way. And the thing is I know it's hard to do, but not to be dependent on anybody for so much that if something happens to them for whatever reason, you put yourself in jeopardy. Right? I mean, I was always a big fan of Anne being as independent as whatever it was. I'm like, sure, right? Because two people who are getting stronger make for stronger. And the other thing is always do stuff together, right? Whatever it is. I joined stuff I would never have joined on my own because it's, hey, if you're doing it, I'm doing it, right? Because there'll always be dinner afterwards or something else. But I found myself, I mean, I went to all her yoga classes. I went to weightlifting with her, and, why not? Because you're supporting people. And then when it's your turn, it gets returned to you. So I think relationships are purely, in a lot of ways, time and thought investments in another person. And it has to be clear as to communication. We used to talk, and we still do it for at least a half an hour every day. What's going on? And we actually worked together side by side, drove into work for 8 years when we started the business, took our dog with us. And as soon as Susie was born, that was the end of working forever. But, that you got to keep investing. Too many people take things for granted, take people for granted, don't ask the right questions at the right time, actually are too nice to too many people for too long, and then get taken for granted or looked as an entitlement. So before we give it back to Catherine, which I can't wait to do, I'll give it back to you right now and we'll get comments because I just feel like got to get you into the game.
Okay, Catherine.
Oh, I thought you were going to comments.
No,
Sorry.
no, I couldn't.
Oh, you just couldn't bring yourself to do it, right?
I needed to get you on first.
Well, it's funny, but you were talking and I'm thinking, yes, I think life is like improv. Yes, and. Yes, and because when you're saying but all the time, but I can't do this, or but but you didn't do it right, or whatever it is. I mean, on an energetic level, the buts don't work, right? You never get what you want when you're living down in those lower vibrations. And when so that's why I talk to people about what I call the ultimate mind diet. How you talk to yourself makes such a difference in everything, and it informs your communication with other people too. It's not likely that you're going to be talking nicely to yourself and not talk, decently to somebody else. If you're giving yourself a hard time, you can't wait to give somebody else a hard time. And I think, it's contagious. And so, okay, who do I want to be today? Right? And there's a lot of fun in that. There's a lot of mischief in that. And I think that that is also a component of forgiveness, because when you're spending your time and your energy about how you can develop yourself, what you can do for yourself, you're not giving all of your time and your resources away to complaining or blaming somebody else, which is a horrible time waster, because it's often, that other person isn't giving you a bit of time. And so you're spending an awful lot of time, still in an old situation that has gone by the wayside how long ago. And the only power that we have really is in the present moment. And so let's make the present moment the best that we can, because it's one step after another, one step after another, and they all add up. And I think that's imperative for people to realize. And I think it's also imperative for people to realize that we have a tendency to think repetitively. And so that's part of the choice. Okay, I have the opportunity to make a different choice today.
Well, and I think, how you feel is how you feel, and you need to follow your feelings, and things aren't meant to serve you forever. Some
Right.
people come into your life for a day, and they become extremely important. Someone gives you a word of encouragement or guidance, and you take it, and all of a sudden you integrate that in your future journey. I think when people know time is precious, and if you don't take advantage of the time you have, or you waste it,
Mhm.
you've lost it. And things are things, relationships are relationships. I agree with Leslie. It's easy to be academic, objective, logical.
Mhm.
But that's why you need to talk to someone who's not into what you're into.
Yeah.
Get fresh ears, get fresh eyes, get someone who's got no skin in the game, knows neither party, knows nothing except what you're sharing.
Mhm.
And I think, you can't have it both ways. You can't sit on a fence, right? You got to either decide to take action
Mhm.
or not take action, and then accept responsibility, and maybe for the first time, accountability.
Mhm.
And what's the problem with saying, hey, it's all my fault? Okay, now that that's out of the way, let's move on, right? I remember being in business and everybody was pointing fingers, and it's like, what is this doing, right? Who cares? I mean, it's over. What are we doing next? Leslie. Anyways,
Well, and oftentimes it's like the scarecrow, right? At the corner. Yeah, going both ways.
that's so true. But real quick, got to get the comment. Charles is here from Hong Kong. So great to see you, Charles. What a wonderful gentleman. If you haven't connected with Charles, at least check out his profile. He does some amazing things. Harvey says, Catherine Chadwick, interesting thoughts about hope needing a negative catalyst. Worth trying to remember that when you need hope. Maria comes back with, there is a quick fix for some things. Anjen says, forgiveness is not a weakness, not selfishness. An arrow of the bow would never come back to be retracted to another direction. Be very wary. Okay. Anything where there's very has got to be good. Express the emotion, understand why. Rebuild, then let go. It's a process with no specific time frame in any of the steps. We have to acknowledge our own role in any situation, as there always is, and that speaks to accountability. Forgiveness allows us to clean up our vibration. It puts us back on the path of feeling good. The higher our vibrations are, the higher we raise our energy to the place of receiving. Very profound. And, there's also people who never get over it. There's people who end up, that's their doom. I mean, they just couldn't handle it. So a lot of people, if you're at least stable and in somewhat of a safe place, that's a lot better than people have already just thrown their hands up in the air or aren't coming back. And at least you're halfway there, because, you always got to use gratitude when you get to your lowest point. You got to count your blessings, and you got to remember also how important you are to so many other people, that they don't want to see something bad happen to you. They want to see a good result. And a lot of times you just think of you. And if you're involved with like your kids and stuff like that, you know how important you are, and not just surviving, but they don't want to have to worry about you, right? They want to know, hey, you're taking steps, you're doing cool things. And why not involve them? I think that's where, if you give up 2/3 of your load to 2 other people, right, in an afternoon, now everybody maybe can carry an easier load, and other people may know what exactly you need in the moment, right? So again, not having a pity party, but in a comfortable, respectful way, being able to share with people are shareable people. With that said, Leslie, you shared so much about your husband and your relationship and what you learned from it, so I think, there's so many people here who can align and relate to it. And Catherine's done the same thing. And it's kind of funny how pairings come together with people who share so much but have no knowledge of what it is they share when they first get attracted to each other.
Yeah.
And then it starts to come out. So this is really like a garden where we got all these beautiful flowers that are starting to bloom.
We got a weed in the middle. We have a dandelion in the middle.
Well, here is to make everybody look and be better. I go out of my way to be mediocre at times. So anyway.
That's really funny.
One thing I'll say about that, though, is not to share this with your kids. Like, I mean, honestly, my kids.
I use examples without a lot of pictures. So anyways, whatever matches better than that, use. So go ahead, Leslie. We got about 7 minutes. So
no, I was just going to say, that is a quandary, because the first place I went to is my kids. And the first thing my daughter said was, divorce him, Mama. But I paid no attention to her. Right. And then there are those who say, that do not tell their children what's going on. So I don't know really whether those are the right people for me.
No, you're right. It's whoever's right for you.
Yeah.
Could be a friend, could be a whoever it is.
Yeah. And I'll tell you one other thing, that it is all about choice, because before the actual divorce, one day I came home. I was getting pretty good. Okay. It's been a couple of years, right? And one day I come home to the mailbox and there's a letter from the IRS. Dear Mrs. Flowers, you owe us $80,000. Here's your payment book of $5,000 a month. Now I'm making $2,500. Okay. So as I look back on this is where I was. I had 3 options. One was to drive off a bridge, literally. Another was to go ahead and take me off to jail, because there is no way that I could come up with $5,000 a month. And the third one is to become homeless and trudge downtown Raleigh with all the homeless. Right. And so in that moment, when I realized that I had 3 choices to make, my higher self came up with a 4th. And without realizing it, I went to my Edward Jones broker, where I had $500. Right. But that was an expert. And what I didn't know was, when I presented this, what do I do? What do I do? I don't even have, I make $2,500 a month. This says 5,000. It's 80,000. I didn't know anything, how it happened. because we'd been separated. He said to me, "You need a tax attorney, right? Who specialized, a CPA who was also a tax attorney. Who knew that there was such a thing?" And he said, "Oh, by the way, let me refer you." And I will tell you, a year and a half later, it was all gone. Had I not picked that fourth choice,
Mhm.
I'm not sure what would have happened with me.
Well, that is so important because same situations I've had, especially in business, that you find out what's logical isn't always legal. Right? What you think should be the way it is,
Right,
or how
right,
it is, or based on fairness or your personal situation. But
Mhm.
that's one maybe benefit you give yourself is wherever I'm at, whatever I'm dealing with, I know there's a person I've yet to meet that can help me with this. And
Absolutely.
there's information I've yet to learn that can help me with this. And usually when I get into that situation, I go right to YouTube or Google, right? Because the same person you're talking to is looking at Google the same way, right? The attorney. And then you get enough so you can be conversational at least when you talk to that person or help you choose that person. Really being an advocate for yourself by finding an advocate for yourself.
That's really a corruption of poor Napoleon Hill's principle of seeking specialized knowledge, right? So now our specialized knowledge is some Yahoo out on YouTube, right?
But here's the thing is if you start with nothing and you add seven self-proclaimed experts, eventually there's going to be some common threads
Yeah.
that you can glean something from. But let's get back to comments real quick, and then we'll get back to Catherine. Thank you for sharing, Leslie. Good to know. Here we go with Marie. Often folks use grudge instead of forgiveness as an armor. To me, whatever works best goes next. So, I'm happy for change. And if it is what it is, then moving forward is always the way. Forgiveness, okay, I think we covered that. So with Catherine, what do you think? It's almost top of the hour. Forgiveness has been taken everywhere, which way, and back to full center. What's your final thoughts, Catherine?
Well, when we talk about the vibration, right, of forgiveness, I want people to think about their physical health as well, right? Because I don't get into chemistry too much, but for every thought and emotion and action, there's a vibrational value, right? And there's a chemical cocktail reaction in your body. And living in grudge land is not inviting a very productive, you know, joyful chemical cocktail reactions in your body, and it's stressful, and that it causes a lot of illnesses. And
Mhm.
what's interesting, about over 90% of human illnesses and conditions are lifestyle induced.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just something to keep in mind. Okay, what am I doing to help my body today too, right? Because our body's a vehicle that we have here, and giving it the best options available is important to keep in mind as well. And it's not just going to the gym. I see an awful lot of unhappy people at the gym, and it's great that you're building a little muscle, but it's like, what are you doing from the inside out? Come on, right? And so
Well, usually what happens in the gym is in January, you're waiting for a machine tapping your foot. In February, you can get a machine and you have someone next to you to talk to. And then by March, there's all sorts of machines and you don't have anybody next to you to
Right.
talk to, because when people set goals,
Yeah.
well, they're not going to achieve them if they leave the gym. But you're right. It's so funny. It
Yeah.
is.
Well, that speaks for commitment. And, I think to Catherine's point, which is so valid, is you ask yourself, this is bad enough. Can I afford to get sick over it too?
Right.
And then how am I going to deal with that and that? So, you got to put to the point where, hey, I've been in situations where all I could think about is just take your next breath, right? I mean, just start breathing, and then eventually you got to eat something, just little things. You got to get out of bed and walk around a little bit. And those are things you have to do because,
Yeah.
who's hurting who here? How bad do you want it?
Right.
Right? And where's the fire? Right? Whatever happened, it'll be there tomorrow. You can guarantee that.
Yeah.
It's always been there. Why would it leave you? It's now you have to leave it for a
Right.
while.
Yeah.
If you want to keep playing with that ghost, you got to be strong enough to keep meeting that ghost, right? Or postpone it, or make sure you don't fall into that trap. Because even Leslie's point about a financial distress,
Yeah.
right? I mean, it's
Yeah.
easy to say, but money comes and money goes, and it's always better to have it than not have it. But if that's your only worry in life, is the money side of it, compared to what other people who have permanent situations, who have, lifestyle situations that are way, way beyond that. And it's not because someone's got it less, you've got it better, but you actually do in a lot of ways. And, I think at a certain point, it's how many people are their own best friends or their own worst enemies? And that's the question you got to ask yourself is forget about that person. He's not even worth it. And some people would love to know I'm feeling this way about them. They're such awful people. They just love to know I'm still messing my life up because of them, and don't give them that benefit. So final words, Leslie.
What can I say? Give yourself a break.
Yeah.
Right? Wherever you are is perfect. You don't have to compare yourself to anybody else and how they do it, right? Your way is the perfect way. And, that's it. Always look up, because every time I look up instead of down, right, about something, and I look up, I meet someone who says the exact right thing that I needed to hear to lift my spirits. So maybe it's no matter what you're going through, always be looking up, because the universe is sending you people and opportunities to give you what you want and be your best self at all times. That's it.
Perfect. I won't say any more except thank you, everyone. Put it in the can. It's a wrap. Everybody come back tomorrow if you can. Harvey will be here. Kelly will be here. I'll be here. Thank everybody for their forgiveness thoughts and insights and quotes. And hopefully everybody now learned a little bit about maybe what forgiveness is and how one can apply it in a more comfortable way for everybody involved. So
let's have Catherine can have a last word. Yes.
Okay, another last word.
One more last word.
Yeah.
I'm just going to agree with you, Leslie. Keep looking.
God. Okay.
No, keep looking up, because it's simple intellectually. Sometimes it's difficult to look up, and reminding yourself to look up is a huge benefit to yourself. So I absolutely agree with you on that. Keep looking up.
Thanks.
Yeah, and have hope. They say faith is the belief in the invisible. So, and I think to Leslie's point, there's books like Think and Grow Rich. There's tapes out there.
Yeah.
There's books, that you can continue to resource. And a lot of times that'll switch your mind a little bit. It did me with Think and Grow Rich. And, for some reason, when you look at that without getting into detail, you wonder how it could be so powerful for so long, because so much of it is kind of dated in the facts, but not the principles.
That's
right. So when someone says I make $10 a week back then, you wonder. But anyways, go on, have a beautiful Saturday, come back and have even a better Sunday, and we'll talk tomorrow. Take care. Bye.
Everybody.